Welcome to a new dark peak comparison. Today we have the Lumenier QAV-R, formerly known as Raceblade, and its clone, the HobbyIn QAV-R. We'll take a look at the quality of these frames and see what they have in common. Here we have the contents of the two kits. Carbon fibre components along the bottom here, fairly similar inventory. Hardware on the Lumenier side, hardware on the HobbyIn side. Lumenier also comes with a battery strap, some stickers, cable ties, XT60 pigtail, PDB and some foam landing pads. The HobbyIn kit just comes with a assembly diagram. Let's start with a comparison of the arms from the two kits. Now the HobbyIn kit that I purchased is the one with the 4mm arms. It's also available with 3mm arms. These 4mm arms are measuring 4.15, 4.11, 4.11, grab the other one here, 4.18, 4.19, 4.23. So a little bit over 4mm, and yeah, perhaps a little bit of inconsistency there. The Lumenier only comes with 4mm arms, and these are measuring 3.89, 3.96 and 4, so it's a little bit thicker towards the centre there. Grab this one for a comparison, 3.98, 3.99, 3.96, so that one's a little bit more consistent, but they're not quite 4mm in thickness. Quality of the materials, the HobbyIn here has a coarser weave than the Lumenier. The laminates on the HobbyIn are fairly thin. Similarly, they're similar on the Lumenier frame, except that the Lumenier appears to have a slightly thicker outside laminate, which may offer some advantage. The quality of the machining work on the two, the Lumenier sort of wins in that department hands down. Very, very clean edges on everything, no burring or damage where they've machined the holes through. The HobbyIn, on the other hand, the outside is pretty good, but where they've machined the holes, it seems to have sort of burred or chipped the carbon fibre there a little bit, so I'd say it's acceptable, but definitely not up to the same quality of machining and materials as the Lumenier. Now the big question is, are these interchangeable, which would make it a true clone? And when I look at these arms, the first thing I notice is that the HobbyIn arm underneath there is slightly larger than the Lumenier arm on top. And looking at the hole pattern there, so the inside hole here is in alignment, the middle hole is aligned, but this outside hole doesn't line up. It's out by about 2.5mm. The HobbyIn arm on the bottom here, this hole is a few millimeters further towards the outside of the arm than it is on the Lumenier. This group of 3 holes are closer together on the Lumenier arm. That could actually be an advantage for the HobbyIn. Being a little bit further out could spread the load a little bit more and give it a little bit more rigidity than the Lumenier. But the outcome of this is that these arms are not interchangeable, so it's perhaps couldn't be considered a true clone in the sense that parts can be swapped between them. Now a look at the top and bottom plates. The HobbyIn bottom plate here measures 2.1mm, 2.1, 2.11, so about 2mm the base plate for the HobbyIn. The Lumenier base plate 2.07, 2.05, 1.96. It's actually less consistent on the Lumenier side than the HobbyIn side. The top plates on the HobbyIn side 1.47, 1.47, 1.46. 1.52, 1.51, 1.56, so about 1.5 millimeters, slightly more on the Lumenier than the HobbyIn. Now, the quality of the carbon fibre, once again, slightly coarser weave on the HobbyIn than the Lumenier for both top and bottom plates. The laminates on this bottom plate of the HobbyIn look fairly consistent and thin. Similarly, there looks fairly similar number of laminates on the Lumenier side as well, so fairly similar in that regard. Quality of the finish or the workmanship, and just feeling the holes here. The Lumenier is very neat. The machining looks very high quality, very consistent, no burring on the edge of the carbon fibre. On the HobbyIn one here, unlike the arms, which were a little bit inconsistent, had some burring, this is actually pretty good. There is a little bit around a couple of these holes here, but it's minimal. And on the top plate, similarly, that is very good quality machining on the HobbyIn, and as I suspect on the Lumenier, this will be very high quality as well. Yep, that's no problems with the machining of either top plates. A little bit poorer machining on the HobbyIn base plate, but it's marginal in that area. Now, we saw that the arms weren't interchangeable. The HobbyIn actually had a broader pattern for the holes, and that's going to be evident, I think, here in these base plates. If I try and line up the holes, yeah, the actual middle holes here are out slightly, maybe 0.5 millimeter. Similarly, this next series of holes are out by about 0.5 to 1 millimeter, and then the outside set of holes for the arms to attach are pretty much out by a hole width about 2.5 to 3 millimeters. So these base plates definitely aren't interchangeable. The base plate for the HobbyIn is slightly wider than the Lumenier one, which is going to also translate to the top plates. Yeah, if I put the HobbyIn base plate on the bottom and this one on top, just to get an idea how much wider these two frames are. The Lumenier is about 36 millimeters, and the HobbyIn is 40.8, so almost 41 millimeters. So about 4 or 5 millimeters difference in the width of the bodies of these two frame kits. Just to check the last few carbon fibre components, the HobbyIn camera bracket components are 1.5, 1.6, 1.44, so about 1.5 millimeters on the HobbyIn side. The Lumenier ones feel a bit thinner, 1.04, 1.05 and 1.05, so a bit more consistency on the Lumenier side, but they are thinner than the HobbyIn side. Now I'll just see how they assemble and how well they fit together. So the HobbyIn brackets here, camera brackets, one of them is a little bit loose, the other one is fairly tight. When I change them over, the problem follows the plate, and I think it's that one plate is under 1.5 millimeters and the other one's about 1.6 millimeters. So that slight difference in thickness, meaning one plate is a nice interference fit and the other one's not. On the Lumenier side here, they're both just a little bit loose. They're halfway in between the tight and loose ones on the HobbyIn side, so at least they're consistent, and yeah, they fit in there quite okay. I've taken the hardware supplied with each kit and attached the arms to the base plate. The Lumenier comes with aluminium M3 screws to attach the arms. The HobbyIn comes with steel M3 screws to attach the arms. In doing so, I've measured the layout, and they do have a slightly different layout. 170 millimeters left to right for the HobbyIn, 140 front to rear, versus 177 left to right on the Lumenier, and 132mm front to rear. So they're not quite the same X layout, meaning they will have slightly different flight characteristics. And this once again confirms that components like arms and base plates, etc., are definitely not interchangeable. Now, something else I've noticed, I've only done these screws up finger tight, and what I can tell you about the HobbyIn is that the machining or design tolerances aren't quite as good as the Lumenier. Each arm here, just due to gaps in the middle here, I can move each arm about 5mm. So of course that could change these dimensions, maybe closer to these. But yeah, they're not quite as tight as the Lumenier over here, which really has, even though these screws are also only finger tight, barely has 1 or 2mm movement in the arms. So much better design and or machining tolerances on the Lumenier. Flipping them over, and I'll point out that they both use aluminium cast, I think, by the looks of it on the Lumenier. Not sure for the HobbyIn whether they're cast or machined, but aluminium, let's say screws on, bolts on this side, nuts on this side that the screws come through to. The Lumenier does come with its own nylon standoffs, and if I can find those, they're a special standoff in that they have only a little amount of thread showing on them. Now the HobbyIn doesn't come with standoffs at all, but by the time I pass that through the PDB, which also comes with the kit, PDB with the Lumenier, there's actually, it's not even 2mm of thread showing through on this side. There's actually only about 1.5mm of thread left to screw into the remaining holes here. I've taken my calipers here and measured the depth of the holes, and these aren't even 2mm deep. On the HobbyIn though, for comparison's sake, they are more like 4.5mm deep, so they're quite a bit, 4.4, so they're more than 2mm more extra depth there, which means that although I have to supply my own nylon standoffs, the standard type of nylon standoff with a longer thread on it, and I'm going to have to supply my own PDB for the HobbyIn, but passing that through there leaves what appears to me that's a much more acceptable amount of thread left to screw into there. And in fact, when I measure it, what's left, it's about 4.82, so if anything I might have to just gently file the end off of this, but there's a lot more thread available in these holes to screw the PDB and nylon standoffs into, which unfortunately in the HobbyIn you have to supply your own. Now I've fitted the standoffs and the camera side plates to each frame. Something I need to point out, the Lumenier version is designed that if you want to use an 1177 camera, it fits between the side plates perfectly, screw in from the side, and you can just use friction to adjust the camera angle, put a big blob of glue under it if you need to, but it is designed to work well with a HS 1177 camera, one of these ones here. And when I take the HS 1177 over to the HobbyIn, the solution isn't anywhere near as neat. There is, because of the extra frame width, there's a lot of clearance down either side of the camera, and although they went to the trouble of putting the holes in the side plates for this purpose, there's really no point. So it would be necessary to use the U-shaped bracket that ships with the HS 1177 camera and mount it to the pre-drilled holes in the base plate. Now if you'd planned to use a standard sort of 27mm by 27mm board camera like this, then it's going to be a problem in the Lumenier frame. It doesn't fit. So not going to be able to use this type of camera with the Lumenier at all. It's too narrow, the body. However, on the HobbyIn, it does look like they've thought of this. If I pass this over, the holes here, at least the two side ones, align with the holes in the lens body, plastic lens body. They don't supply any screws, but a couple of sort of small self-tapping screws could go in there, or a whole bunch of hot glue, and then that will fit down in between. So that's something to consider. The HobbyIn frame is more designed for the standard 27 by 27 board camera. The Lumenier frame is designed for the HS1177. It's really that simple. In which case, I really don't know, this small plate that comes with the Lumenier must be for a much smaller board camera to fit in the frame. The HobbyIn frame, using this supplied carbon fibre plate and mounting the 27 by 27 board camera in it, I'm going to end up with a predefined or fixed camera angle due to the way the frame sits, and to me, when I look at that, it's really not enough camera angle for how I fly. That's only maybe 30 degrees of camera angle, and 25-30 degrees, which really isn't enough in my opinion, but that's something to consider. So the frames are built out now, they're complete. The Lumenier frame, I'll point out, uses aluminium M3 screws supplied in the kit to install the standoffs. The HobbyIn, in comparison, uses steel M3 screws supplied to attach the standoffs. The HobbyIn kit has a few screws left over, some short M3s and some medium M3s. The Lumenier has a bunch of screws left over, but I'm presuming these will be the aluminium M3 screws for attaching 2200 series motors, and smaller stainless steel screws, I believe, for attaching 1800 series motors. There's no motor screws supplied in the HobbyIn kit. Something else I've noticed in the top plates of these two that I didn't pick up earlier is that the hole for the VTX pigtail is just the right size on the Lumenier. I measured that and it came out at 6.2 millimeters. In comparison, it's very loose on the HobbyIn. There's a lot of free play there. A washer on here and it'll probably be okay, but it's perhaps a bit of oversight, and measuring that hole came out about 7.7 to 7.8 millimeters. So perhaps a bit of oversight on their behalf. Before I weigh these frames, let's just point out that the Lumenier does come with a whole bunch of extra components: pigtails, battery strap, battery foam, PDB, motor screws. Now, to be fair, I've left those off of this frame, of course, so that we can compare the weight of them in an even state. Just the carbon fibre components, the screws, the body screws, and the aluminium standoffs on both frames. Let's see how they weigh. First of all, the Lumenier original QAV-R comes in at 102 grams. The HobbyIn clone QAV-R comes in at 127 grams. My maths would tell me that's 25% heavier, about 25 grams heavier for the HobbyIn frame over the Lumenier frame. Let me wrap up this review first by looking at some design flaws that are common across both of these frames. First of all, a lack of standoffs. I think an extra pair of standoffs, or at least one extra standoff in the middle at the back here, is required for this frame. This is the area that's going to support your battery, and in a crash there's going to be a lot of force on that top plate, which I expect will crack or break due to a lack of support underneath. That's a common flaw on both of these designs. That issue could also be overcome by them supplying a slightly thicker top plate, maybe 2 or 2.5 millimeter top plate, and in which case that would also help address the issue back here. This top plate on this Lumenier frame is identical, I think, to my QAV-180 top plate, which has already cracked through near the motor screws here. So I think that they need to perhaps consider redesigning this, not making such a large hole here, and or perhaps a thicker top plate, because this is susceptible to damage or breaking off in a crash upside down. That's a common issue across both of them. Another design flaw which Lumenier were hammered for when they first released this, they designed it in a way that you could easily remove 3 screws to take an arm off if you broke one in an accident. The irony is that because they don't put an extra base plate under here to sandwich the arms in place, it's unlikely that you're actually going to break an arm. You'll break the base plate before you break the arm. If I was to flex that any further, I can tell you this base plate will crack well before an arm breaks. So that's a bit of a design flaw. As far as I know, Lumenier have since addressed it. When I bought mine, I purchased an extra base plate, which I plan to cut the ends off and then sandwich that over the arms. But I believe they've now since have available a X-shaped base plate that fits over the arms here, which will help to solve that issue. There's no such offer that I can see on the HobbyIn website for any extra support brace to go under there. Now to talk about the differences between these frames and the comparison to sum it up. The HobbyIn frame comes in at US $48 including shipping, compared to US $115 for the Lumenier frame excluding shipping. Other differences in these kits, of course, there's a lot of extra hardware in the Lumenier kit, not just the aluminium hardware, but in the screws here, but battery pad, XT60 pigtail, battery strap, PDB, the motor screws. So maybe $10 or $15 worth of extra components with the Lumenier frame, which means that the real difference between the frames cost-wise perhaps is closer to just US $50 by the time you factor in purchasing these bits for the HobbyIn frame. Now, the websites for the two, HobbyIn, very little information on their website related to this. Interestingly, as of today, the Lumenier website is actually quite misleading. It suggests that this frame weighs 99 grams as a frame and comes with oxide steel screws, when in fact it comes with aluminium screws. They even say it's 2mm Allen key hex wrench to take them off, when in fact it's 2.5mm. That's a minor detail, but clearly they need to go back and review their information and perhaps modify it to better fit the description. Lumenier, though, in their defence, they do have a full range of spare parts available for this frame. You can buy spare arms, base plates, top plates. It's all available as spare parts. As of today, the HobbyIn frame has no spare parts available for it. So if you were to damage this frame, break the base plate or break an arm or even the top plate, unfortunately it's a throwaway and buy another one, which interestingly then you're straight up to the price of this. We worked out about a $50 US difference in price. Therefore, as soon as you break something on this HobbyIn frame and have to buy another one, you're now up to the price of the Lumenier. So that's something worth considering. If they were to offer spare parts for this HobbyIn frame, I think it would have to be a serious contender for somebody looking for a more budget priced frame. Some other things, interestingly, the Lumenier, I'm really concerned about the lack of depth in these holes where the nylon standoffs screw into. It's really only 1.5mm. It's barely one or two turns of the nylon screw into them. The HobbyIn seem to have addressed that and made them longer. So I really think that's an oversight on the behalf of the Lumenier. Camera options could play a role in choosing one of these frames. The Lumenier frame really only supports the use of these 1177 cameras, but it does it very, very well. I like the way it mounts and the adjustment that it gives. It will fit in the HobbyIn frame as well, using the U-shaped bracket supplied with the camera. Otherwise, the HobbyIn frame will also support the use of the traditional board type camera, so a bit more versatility with the HobbyIn frame. and versus the Lumenier. Strength wise, just to do a comparison, I think that the amount of flex in the Lumenier compared to the amount of flex in the HobbyIn, I'd actually say the HobbyIn has perhaps slightly less flex than the Lumenier. Maybe it's only 5 or 10%. Well, that's really hard to judge, but yeah, maybe the slightly fatter arms and the wider bolt pattern back here mean that there's just a fraction less flex in that frame. The X layout of these frames and the extra weight of the HobbyIn means that this could have slightly different flight characteristics to the Lumenier. If you were really serious about racing, the extra 25 grams more weight in the HobbyIn could be an issue, and the Lumenier would be a better choice. And in which case, if you're racing, you're probably going to break bits, and then the Lumenier at least has the spare parts available. So I hope you've enjoyed my review and comparison of these two frames. It's really up to you if you're looking at buying them. But if you like the information I've brought you today, please consider subscribing, and I'll be bringing you more comparisons in the future.